20 Minute Tim's flagship podcast, episode 308. I'm your host, Jamie, and I'm joined by Melly.
Yes.
And Stephen.
Howdy.
Good old Flag Day, wasn't it?
Yeah, it certainly was. A very impressive display. A thoroughly enjoyable afternoon all round. Sun was out for a bit as well.
Jeez, was it
Sun
not?
was out, yeah. So, yeah, thoroughly enjoyable. We'll get into all the details, but all good things to report so far.
Since Steve walked home for the game, he looked like the bad guy for Captain America. Sun was beating down on
Was
him.
it called the Red Skull or
Yes,
something?
the Red Skull.
I looked like the baddie from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom with the red bit painted on the top
Poor
of his head.
guy. Melly, a ginger, how did you survive that?
I was alright actually. I had the old cap on, so I was smarter than Stephen.
It was absolutely chucking it down when I left the house, and then
Yeah.
when you get to the stadium, you're sitting there like, oh my God, this is sweating. And Celtic put on a tantalising display, but before all that, Martin, Melly, there was some cinch business to take care of. Rylan on the big screen. Now, we did say last season that we wanted Rylan at the match, presenting the trophy or doing the halftime. He didn't do any of that, but there was a wee video that Callum McGregor looked so awkward doing, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to hear it over the tannoys when we were in, but I seen it on Twitter, I think it was, and just good to see Rylan in there after last season and cinched it, boys. It was good to get the wee message from him. It would have been nicer if it was at Celtic Park. It was at another stadium, wasn't it? But it was a good day. I mean, Celtic got the result, but nice weather. The display was brilliant. Hard to tell when you're underneath it,
Yeah.
but seeing the pictures on the TV looked absolutely class and nice wee fireworks. And then Celtic put on a decent display as well.
But nobody does a lot as Stephen, particularly not in Scotland.
No.
You know, these, not just Flag Day. Famously, not just Flag Day, but any of these sorts of things. It's always a wee bit, it just feels like we've had so many of those in the past decade or so. Those Flag Days, you're going up to the stadium, the place is absolutely buzzing, and then the display comes out and the music and the fireworks, and you can smell the pyro, and it's like, this is what it's all about. I took a friend of mine who was over from Canada, and he'd not been at a game for a long time, and he was absolutely buzzing about it.
Is this a guy who always jinxes it?
No.
Or is that different? No, that's an American guy, isn't it? Yeah.
So, for those of you who don't know, I've sort of found the last couple of times that if you bring someone from out of town to a Celtic game, it sort of jinxes it. So I brought an American friend, and he jinxed the result. And then the guy in front of me brought an Argentinian friend, and that jinxed it. And then I thought, God, I'm going to bring this guy from Canada and jinx
You're not going
the
to
result.
believe it. You're not going to believe the atmosphere. It's such a great. It's some drab nothing.
It's all that, yeah. It's all that. Oh, you're going to love it, mate. Bring your phone, take plenty of pictures, and fuck all happens.
Well, it was one of those occasions where I was actually glad to have missed the unfurling of the flag. I saw it back later, and Callum McGregor again looked extremely awkward while doing it. He didn't. Some guy eventually came up and sort of took the wee string off him because he was just standing there holding it like a balloon. So, but I was glad to have missed it entirely because I was under the absolutely brilliant display, so I couldn't see anything that was going on because I was behind my big bit of green plastic. I hadn't seen that obviously until I got up the road and fully was able to take it in with some videos that had been posted on Twitter, and it was absolutely brilliant. Tremendous credit to the people who put that together. It looked absolutely brilliant, to be honest. Like, it was one of those ones that it must be so easy to get something like that wrong, because all it takes is for like 10 people not to get the memo and just to turn up steaming and no lift it up, and it would look a bit woolly, but it was absolutely flawless from where I was sitting anyway.
Right, that's enough of the Oxbridge pleasantries. Right, down to the business of beating Aberdeen. Rangers obviously won, and it's going to be that for the rest of the season. I think week to week to week we're going to be watching each other's results. Rangers got to play first, don't know why. The champion should always kick off the season as far as I'm concerned. Celtic had to go. We had to come up against Aberdeen. Aberdeen are a team that have probably got their eye on third, fourth place, so it could have been potentially a tricky tie, but I thought Aberdeen were pretty flat and ordinary.
It's difficult to tell. Celtic get off to a great start, and that's the thing you don't want to happen when you go to Celtic Park, because once we get in a lead, we're usually very good for it. We don't usually concede. I think Ian Crocker said we only conceded 3 goals in the second half in 2022, so Celtic are looking good. But Aberdeen, it's hard to tell. It's a new team, so they'll not quite know what they're doing yet, but all right at the back. I thought that boy Coulson was good at left back. Yeah. Their new captain looked as if he'll headed everything away, but just up front, they're toothless, absolutely toothless, and especially if you've got a guy like Johnny Hayes getting a very good chance and fluffing his lines as usual. It's just nothing up there that really worried me at all.
I kind of feel, Stephen, though, with these teams, and it's funny, I was listening to Sports Sound, and Willie Miller sort of echoed my thoughts a wee bit. You're coming away from the stadium and you're thinking, right, Aberdeen, you're not going to win that game. You might as well play. You might as well take it to Celtic. And I thought some of Celtic's patterns of play they weren't. We weren't cutting and thrusting Aberdeen open, particularly just after we scored the first goal in the first half. Aberdeen were they just weren't at it. And I know Celtic were good, and we grew into the game. And there were some spells of really good play, particularly from Matt O'Reilly, and I thought Greg Taylor was good. But just to sort of comment on Aberdeen, part of me just wishes they would come and have a go. You've left with no points anyway.
Yeah,
it's the first game of the season. It's basically a gimme.
We moaning that teams won't just simply open up and let us play through them.
Take the game to us.
Yeah, those are the two choices you have when you turn up to a game like this. If we accept that it's hard to judge Aberdeen on that game, I think they'll clearly have easier games to negotiate. I think it's a tough task to turn up on Flag Day, and I think Jim Goodwin, I nearly said Jim O'Brien there, it's not him, it's the other one, it's the other former Celtic youth player, Jim Goodwin. Actually said that. He said it's like turning up on Flag Day, although the fans are obviously up for it, it's a difficult game to negotiate that kind of thing. So if you accept that they're not probably going to win, it's a tough task to do that. You really have two choices. You can either try and spoil the party a wee bit, which they looked like they tried to do, or you can play and get the same result anyway. So I do agree that you would rather see teams go down, at least giving Celtic some trouble. But to be honest, I think Aberdeen...
sorry to interrupt, but does no give them a bit of confidence? So see their managers teach them this way to play all season, right? We're going to be on the front foot, we're going to be aggressive, we're going to take the game to teams, we want to play, we want to get involved, and all that part the managers give it. And then the first game of the season, go, right, we're not playing it here. See if he sometimes I think if a manager just says to his players, I trust you, go out and play what we've been working on, go out and play the way that I want you, a bit like Ange did. Do you know, go out and play the way that I want you to play all season. You might lose, but we're learning something here, and we might make a show of us. Teams come in against Celtic, and teams will come in against Celtic, and we're going to pump somebody 5 or 6-0. Yeah. And they'll be doing the same thing. They'll be trying to contain, but they're still going to get pumped 5-0 anyway.
Yeah, I think I've often wondered that about Scottish football because a lot of teams turn up to Celtic Park and play like that. And I think it must be utterly demoralising to play for Livingston because no one gets into football to try and play like that. You all think you're going to emulate Ronaldinho or something like that, right? Yeah. You all think it's going to be free-flowing Barcelona at their peak. That's the kind of thing that would get you into football. No one turns up to be like a wrecking machine at the home of your kind of the biggest club in the country. But with that, I think Aberdeen will be better than that. I think I don't think they would have budgeted for trying to get points from that game. In a way, I'm kind of glad that Aberdeen did play like that because I think it was a test for Celtic. Celtic had to be patient, they had to be strong, they had to fight for a win. They got the early goal, yes. And at that point, it seemed like it was only a matter of time before they would get the second. But you never know what can happen. You never know. But that's why we watch football, after all. It can be unpredictable. But I'd rather have had a hard-fought 2-0 win to kick off the season than just going out and smashing somebody 6-0. Because I don't know if you necessarily learn in from that. Obviously, I'd rather watch that. But having been tested and still coming away with the win, I think it can only be a good thing, especially as it's the first competitive game of the season, which is rare for Celtic because we've often had a bit of a lesson off some European minnows by now.
Having no games is a bit strange at this point in the season, but like Aberdeen, thought they could have done a lot better. Maybe they've just not got the players to do that, but if they're wanting to go and finish third, you want to see more from them, don't you? You want to see how they can go out, but at the same time, Celtic are very difficult to play against because we play so well and the numbers we get when we overload with the way we play. So you can see it is difficult for them. But are you still going to take this stance when Celtic go into the Champions League? Just go at it. Just go at it.
You know what? I tried that last season, and I think that's the way Ange is probably going to play anyway. He's made that pretty clear. So I'm just going to have to make my peace with it. First goal came through Stephen Welsh. So that's Stephen Welsh now started the game, scored. Second choice centre half.
I thought taking away the goal, but played well. I thought he played well. He's just not as good as Starfelt, but doesn't mean he's a bad player at all. He's a very good centre half for Celtic. I don't see him making many mistakes. I think he passes the ball well. He tries to make a lot of passes because it may mainly be him that's left on the ball out the centre half. So I think he done well. I think these are the games you've got Stephen Welsh for, and if he needs to come in and perform, great.
He always does.
Yeah. And we're not looking at it now going, we need to rush back Starfelt or we need to get Jens in. Stephen Welsh deserves to keep his place right now, and I'm happy to see him in there.
With that goal as well, I think he pretty much cemented his place as the greatest aerial threat in the opposition box we have in the squad, with the exception of Julian, who got a few goals as well.
From set pieces, certainly.
Yeah, but he's...
Another Giacomakis, isn't it?
Giacomakis.
Sandy in there.
Because that's Welsh's fifth goal for Celtic. I was quite surprised at.
Yeah.
You can't really remember that many, but I remember
That's because of that season we've blocked out.
True. He's got 5 goals now, all with his head. Carter Vickers got 4 last season, none with his head. He hasn't scored a headed goal for Celtic yet. So he is good in the air and he does carry a threat. Starfelt hasn't scored at all, and Julian is absolutely nowhere near the squad. Giakoumakis is slightly different because he's a big centre forward, but if you're going to have... We often bemoan the lack of height in the team because Beaton's gone, Rogic is gone now and all that, but Stephen Welsh is definitely a handful.
It's nice, this, isn't it? Like, all last season we bemoaned the fact that Celtic don't score from corners. 2 minutes into the first game of the season, great delivery from O'Reilly in there with the left peg, and I love seeing headers like that just angled into the corner. It's just great, and it's not as if it was a free header. He did have to use a bit of his strength to get up there, so it was a great header from the boy.
Matt O'Reilly's corner was terrific, but Matt O'Reilly's performance all day was sensational.
He's a very nice player to watch, isn't he? For more than one reason. Let's say a very popular player with the ladies there now, I have to say. But he's a very elegant player to watch. I think he's only going to get better. There's been a lot of people saying that we haven't replaced Tom Rogic yet. Maybe not, but kind of if he's going to play most games, then we kind of have. Like, there's no such... Players are always replaced. They're just not always replaced like for like. You would have to say this is literally the replacement for Tom Rogic if a player came in order to stop that being said.
Ange did say that about him, didn't he?
Yeah, but if Matt O'Reilly is playing now in that position, then in effect we have. Just because we haven't signed one after Tom Rogic has left the club doesn't mean that Matt O'Reilly isn't the kind of natural successor, and he doesn't have to be the same type of player because very few people are. That we haven't really... You could make an argument for loads and loads of players over the years that we haven't replaced directly like for like, but Celtic have managed to stay successful that entire time, so it's not always a like for like case.
I thought O'Reilly as well, what I've noticed this season, pre-season in this game, he's making more chances for himself. He's getting into more dangerous areas for me because he only got a couple of goals towards the end of the season, but before that he'd the one deflected one against Aberdeen at Pittodrie, and you're looking at Tom Rogic leaving going, right, we need to see somebody who's going to create and score goals, and O'Reilly looks like he's doing that. He's crossed it in for Welsh, and then he'd a good crossover for Kyogo who missed at the back post, and he'd a shot that rebounds, and then Hatate doesn't get a penalty. So he's getting into these positions, and it's good to see. He is a really good player. It's nice to see a guy like that with a good left peg on him.
You think we're going to struggle to hold on to him? Not this season, but long term?
Eventually, yeah. I think that's the reality we're in with most of the emerging young players at Celtic. Celtic are in a good position though. We've got a lot of these guys tied down on long-term contracts, so it's not like there's any urgency to get rid of any of these guys. We don't have to sell one of them, but it's always a danger if he continues on this trajectory that he's on. Hopefully not this season or even next season, but once he gets to like 22, 23 and maybe a full Danish cap by then, potentially, big clubs are going to come in for him. I don't know about any time soon though.
He must have his eye on the World Cup, getting into that Denmark squad, doesn't he? And if he can keep up the form he does from now until November, probably went back against him playing there, and fair play to the guy, because he could have sat it out and waited for England and maybe got a move to England, but he's in there at Denmark, and I just love watching him play. He's such a good player. He's got a bit of everything. He's athletic. He's got a nice touch. He gets about the pitch well. And
how much did we pay for $1.5 million?
Some ridiculous anyway. Not
steal,
enough.
An absolute steal.
Absolute robbery. Much like Hatate and Maeda and Kyogo. All these guys were an absolute steal.
And Greg Taylor. You've got to turn on the Instagram comments so we can tell you how much we love you. You can't comment on his Instagram unless you're a friend. I thought Greg Taylor was, I want to say typically brilliant, but it might be a wee bit too early to say that, but he's looking very, very comfortable now in that role, that midfield role that Ange has given him.
Yeah, when he moves inside there, he receives the ball really well, and he's never been that fullback like Kieran Tierney that goes on the outside and beats a player and has pace and whips it in. So this system really does suit him down to the ground, the way he moves in there, because he is good at passing, he's good at finding space. And
I think he took the ball off Welsh. I think in the whole first half he took the ball off Welsh almost every single time. Welsh gets the ball as Celtic recycle the play. Greg Taylor moved inside, took it in the feet, turned and played it to Maeda, Jota, whoever was on his outside there every single time.
Yeah,
he looks so comfortable.
He does. He's comfortable on the ball, but at the same time, he's one of these guys. Even when Celtic weren't doing well, he never shirked away from receiving the ball. He's always looking to get on it. He's always trying to do something, even though he's not the most creative. And I've always said it over the years, competition kills complacency. He's got a £4 million Argentinian wonder kid on his back here, ready to take his position. And this is the thing with Celtic. When you looked at Greg Taylor or Juranovic, a couple of bad games, well, there's players on the bench sitting there who are going to take your place and who are good enough. And when you look at the first 11, you're going, that's a very strong team. But also 5 subs, all good, and there was 4 subs on there. Like, well, they could have made an impact, and there's players that didn't even make the squad. So this having players in here now that can take these guys is probably going to raise the level, because again, Matt O'Reilly, if he doesn't perform well, David Turnbull's sitting there, Aaron Moyes on the bench as well. These guys can come on and make a difference. And just the Greg Taylor, like, used to always say maybe a 6 or a 7 out of 10. He's starting to push that up by his own standards and starting to give him, this is what we're going to be judging him on now. I think everybody has changed their opinion on them, and rightly so.
Not everybody. No, we did. We put out a tweet and they got the usual, he was okay, he's not that great. You need to stop clinging on to this. People just sort of pick a bit of a bogeyman, don't they? And Greg Taylor's the bogeyman, but Bernabei's going to have to be A, very, very good, and B, a very quick learner if he's going to slot into Ange's system and have any desire of taking Greg Taylor's place, isn't he, Stephen?
Yeah, Bernabei he's got plenty of time. He's got plenty of time to adapt, because there's no urgency to get him into the team. It's not a position we're crying out for, and that's credit to Greg Taylor that we're not clamouring for this guy to come into the team, because Greg Taylor's perfectly comfortable there. I mean, I don't want to sit here and be like make my view like the antithesis of others, but I don't really know. I don't really know what it would take for Greg Taylor to be fully accepted as like a really quite good Celtic player. Is he perfect? No, I don't think he is, and I think it's quite unfair that he's constantly dug up for having a bad game against Bodo last season. I mean, quite a lot of people did, and we've all had.
He's targeted, isn't he, Greg Taylor? Because even Aberdeen were shelling balls on top of him. That's everybody's tactic when they come to Celtic Park a lot of the time. And
never shucks it either, does he?
That's what I was about to say. He never shucks it. He's a wee bit shorter than me. He's 5'7", so I've got like got about 6 inches on him on Greg Taylor. But he never gets bullied. He never shucks it. He puts the work in.
No, and he's under clear instructions as well to just not shell the ball up the pitch. For a long time, Scottish football has suffered with having left backs whose primary job was to boot it down the line. Like that was basically the 90s, the 2000s. That's basically what you do. You pick up the ball out wide and you boot it down the line and let the winger chase it. But he's obviously this team. Just don't do that unless it's a complete emergency and it's the last resort is just to get rid of it. But he's very comfortable in playing in his own box, and maybe he's doing like wee drag backs and all that, drawing players in, knocking it past them, playing 1-2s. He's playing really well. He's been very, very good for months now, spilling from one season into the next. He's had presumably a good pre-season and has carried off, picked up where he left off last season. He's there on merit. Bernabei will have to bide his time, and that's a good thing as well, because that guy has never played outside Argentina before, and we expect him to play a part at some point. But if he plays 12, 15 games this season, and Greg Taylor plays the rest, I think we're in a good spot in that position.
It's nice this, bringing in new players and not having to fling them in at the deep end, because we've got qualifiers. And remember putting Starfelt on after signing a couple of hours later against Hearts this
Kyogo,
time last season. Kyogo came off the bench. It was a wild time, but now we've got a good settled team, and we've got other players who you can see, right, I understand why we've signed them. They could be good players for us, but we're not having to fire them in and then make judgments on them quickly. We can allow the time to adjust, like Stephen said.
Well, he talks about options, Stephen. There's a couple of wee positions in the pitch where you think Ange might have a bit of either an embarrassment of riches or a bit of a selection issue, depending on what way you want to look at it. Hatate or David Turnbull's one. Now, I'm happy to go on record. I did say last season, I've been wrong in the past once or twice. I mean, 300 odd podcasts, I'm bound to be wrong once or twice. And I did say that I didn't think that David Turnbull would be Ange's 100%. If he could pick any player, would he pick David Turnbull as perfect player for that role? But you said it watching the game. You said we're entering you almost I forgot territory with David Turnbull, aren't we? And was it you, Melly, that said you would probably start him over Hatate? So, Stephen, where do you lie on this?
I don't have a one preference over another.
On the fence is where he's sitting.
Yeah. I'm right on the fence on that. I don't really have a preference. I think David Turnbull deserves more credit than he gets, though, to be honest. I think much like Greg Taylor, I think David Turnbull, I don't want to be totally reductive about it and say that it's because he signed from a Scottish club rather than a Japanese one. Maybe that's a little bit more glamorous, a little bit more exciting for people. But David Turnbull's been brilliant for Celtic. Like, he's had an injury. Ange picked him for pretty much every game he was available for last season, and then he missed 2 or 3 months. He got 10 goals last season, which is only 2 or 3 short of Jota, only a handful short of Abada and Giakoumakis as well. He contributes massively, and when he came on, everything looked a little bit more assured when he came off the bench at the weekend there as well. I was watching the highlights back as well. Does he technically get an assist for Jota, even though he fed him the ball like 40 yards from goal? He beat a player and smashed it into the top corner.
Yeah, that's probably an assist.
Well, there you go. That's an assist. That's a goal contribution, even though Jota did absolutely everything on his own.
I think Hatate's a good player, but watching the game there, like, it was decent the first half, but he's sort of into the second half, he's quite erratic with his passing still, and he's not got the excuses anymore of needing a break and all that. And look, well, I still think he's a good player. With Hatate, I think you get an 8 out of 10 or above, or 5 out of 10. Yeah. There's no in between.
I'd agree with that.
With David Turnbull, I just think he's more assured on the ball. His passing's better, because Hatate, he tries to make things happen, but the passes he gives away aren't ones that he's making things happen for me. It's simple ones sometimes, whereas Turnbull, I just always think he's on the turn, looking to get into teams. He gets himself into very dangerous positions, and I think a midfield free of McGregor, Turnbull and O'Reilly has a really good balance to it. But look, it's a long season. We're going to need all these guys anyway, and having these dilemmas, it's not as if we need to drop Hatate because he's on bad form or anything. It's just nice to have these options and change it up every once in a while.
Speaking of options, do you think, did you want to come in again?
No, but I was just going to put a bow on that by saying, look, Ange literally said during the week there that he doesn't have a first 11, so any chat of what the best first 11, it's kind of redundant, to be honest. We don't have a first choice in every position. Generally, you'll have 2 or 3 players who will, more often than not, will play most games, if not all. Callum McGregor's one. Kyogo, I don't think comes into that category because Giakoumakis is arguably, if not as good, then pushing him a bit effective.
That's what I've got here next, because I think similar to the Turnbull and Hatate debate, I think there's a Kyogo and Giakoumakis debate, and I think people are a wee bit afraid to have it, because the truth is, like you said, Giakoumakis is effective, right? But I think that might be, that's sort of doing him a wee bit of a discredit, like almost like he's a blunt instrument, like he's a Chris Killen or one of these useless guys.
Very good player.
The deadly Kiwi, Chris Killen.
That we just throw up front to do things. I think Kyogo's obviously the better footballer, but I thought Kyogo was very quiet against Aberdeen, and when Giakoumakis came on, I felt more assured. I felt we were more likely to get a goal, and I'm starting to feel that way about Giakoumakis. I'm a fan of him. I was a fan of him last season, and I definitely think there's a discussion there to be had, Stephen, about who's not. It's not who's the better player, because Kyogo is the better footballer out of the two, but who's going to win you the game? Who starts?
Yeah, I don't. Again, this is massively sitting on the fence, but I'm going to throw over to Brother Brendan Rodgers, who once said the team that finishes the game is every bit as important as the one who starts it. So
5 subs helps that as well.
Exactly. We can change literally half of our outfield team if things aren't going well. So there is a place for both of them, not only in the squad, not only to start games, but there's a place for both of them in games. Now, I want to differentiate, I want to be clear about it. That's not me saying 4-4-2, get it lumped up to Giakoumakis for the flick-ons. I'm saying that both of them can play at least half an hour.
It's about time that came back.
Yeah, it is. More strikers equals more goals, as we've always maintained.
About time the big man, small man came back, for sure.
But Giakoumakis, going by the reception he gets when he comes off the bench, I'd say he's maybe the most popular player we have. Like, just going by the crowd erupting every time his name is read out. Bit of an underdog, isn't he? I think so. I think he's one of those guys that's really, really easy to get behind. And see, when you think about where he's come from, not geographically, but having missed that penalty against Livingston, when everybody thought he's an absolute donkey in the first few games he played, and then he was missing for months as well. Why have we signed this guy? They've gone from that to basically the biggest cult figure, and that sounds like I'm doing him a disservice, but that's kind of how it's worked out for him. Not only a cult figure, but a really good player. But he's an extremely popular member of this squad now.
I think it's going to be there'll be different players for different games. I think in some away games, Giakoumakis will be more effective. For me, if Giakoumakis plays, I think you play Ralston because I think he's got better delivery than Juranovic. But again, sometimes you can say Ralston's more effective than Juranovic because he does things differently. So I think it's going to be, look, we've got the team that will start, but 5 subs there, all of good quality. They can come on and just as well, because Kyogo, he's not that kind of player that is always involved in a game, because what we want to do is him push the defence back, create the space, and then get and then the chances. All he was missing from the game really was a chance. He had a couple, he just couldn't take them. It was just stretching the odd time. But if Kyogo scores, then we don't really talk about him. It wasn't even a bad game, but it was
just quiet.
Just quiet. But that's up to us to create more chances for him as well.
Are you saying, Melly, that it's horses for courses? Or, as I once saw someone say online, horses for horses?
No, well, so what Melly's saying is different players for different occasions, and what you're saying is the team that starts the game and the team that ends the game are both the same in your mind. So, you know, at one point, lads, I'm going to have to press you for an opinion on something.
Have I technically said that a game is more than one occasion?
Yeah.
Is that basically what I've said?
You're basically both just sat on the fence about it, right?
I'd always start Kyogo because I think he's the better player.
Thank you, Melly. A player that you can't possibly have no opinion about is Jota.
Oh, fantastic. Absolutely tremendous. I'm still pinching myself that we've got this guy for.
Cut the hair, though. Not sexy.
Yeah. Any comment I make on Jota's hair will be seen as bitter, right?
Yes.
For very obvious reasons. But no. I'm in the best position to be commenting on that. It looks terrible, mate. It looks
so it's really is entering Zorowski territory here of weirdness.
Yeah, exactly. I know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to this.
But we are wrongly placed for this, because I was at the game and there was a guy at the game and he had his young daughter with him rather, and she was just like infatuated.
Yeah.
He's so handsome. I'm like, no, he's how? On what
We're going to
planet?
get comments about this.
She's like, look at his hair. So people, what age is Jota?
23, 22.
So maybe people that age think that's good hair, but get it cut, lad. Anyway,
get
mate.
shaved. Get that shaved. No, but fantastic player. I think back to discussions we were having over the summer, like, if you had to keep one, would it be Cameron Carter-Vickers? Would it be Jota? We've managed to get both, but I made the case at the time that Cameron Carter-Vickers was maybe the more important of the signings. But a guy like Jota, to have a guy as talented as that in your squad, I mean, 6.5 million or something they paid for him. He's worth 4 or 5 times that already if you were to go on and sign him. The guy, it's an absolute steal. I know it's many times more than we've paid for the likes of Hatate and all that, but everything scales up. When you talk about 6 odd million for Jota, an absolute snip. And I saw that Benfica fans are already cracking up about having sold him for an absolute pittance as well.
He was a bit of a star there. I mean, he had a reputation as in the youths.
Yeah, I mean, we do that as well. Obviously, we bum up young, quite a lot, and sometimes they don't amount to much, and quite often years later we're still ruin having let that guy go. But it just shows you like there's talent out there, and Celtic have unearthed an absolute gem there. 6 million is ridiculous for a player of that level. I mean, I don't want to kind of spoil any kind of predictions or anything like that, but if he keeps playing like that, he's Player of the Year material straight away. I don't think that anybody can live with him on that kind of form. I really don't. I think he's already done a lot for Celtic. He's already scored in Europe. He's already scored against Rangers, and he's only getting better and better.
I think since he's signed this permanent deal, I know it's only one competitive game in the pre-season games, but he looks more, I don't know if it's just my perception, but he looks more confident now. He's trying more things on the pitch. It's like, right, I'm here, I can relax, I can maybe express myself a wee bit more.
Is that a settled thing? Is that like
maybe
future's at least ironed out for now? It was all a little bit up in the air. It was it was a loan, but with an option to buy. So there's the uncertainty there. There was a whole summer of will he, won't he? There was the holiday of a lifetime that he was on. But now he's back. His future his future's sorted for at least, I mean, a 5-year contract. I don't expect him to see that out, but he's not really under any pressure now.
Another guy we've got a nice long contract.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I love the guy. I think you're maybe right. There is something in that, like that sort of, not pressure, but that wee weight off the shoulder of maybe knowing will I be here, won't I be here. But after seeing him last season winning the league, and you thought, see if we can get this guy. Like, I was always of the opinion that it would be Jota for me if it was one of the two out of them, because I just don't see Celtic without him now. Cal McGregor, Carter Vickers, Joe Hart, Jota, all first names in the team sheet for me. When you're looking at Celtic, you go, these guys need to play because they're what makes Celtic tick. And it's not just that, like McGregor and Carter Vickers are good to watch because of what they do, but Jota's why you love football. A guy that takes players on, a guy that has a bit of tricks and all that. Ange did say towards the end of the first half, about 30-35 minutes, Celtic lost a wee bit of control of the game, and he said Jota was maybe doing things
I think
wrong.
he called him a culprit.
Yeah.
Or he called him one of the culprits.
So I think Ange will obviously keep him on board, but just when you're there and you think, going to the game at the weekend, you think, get to see Jota playing. Like, you know what I'm like with a wee winger like that. It's great to see him, and look, he's adding more things to his game, but again, does score important goals for Celtic. That's him scored in all 4 times he's played against Aberdeen as well, so he's getting one of those guys that has teams he likes to play against already, and I'm just delighted we've got him and Carter Vickers, because I think I look at the sort of nucleus of this team and even the squad, I'm going, if we don't sign anybody else, it's not a big deal. We are good. It's just the only thing is, because Jota, he's irreplaceable. If he goes out the team, we do lack that wee bit of creative spark out wide, but yeah, it's just not going to get another Jota.
Well, it's not just you or I or us or anyone within the sound of my voice at the moment that talk about wanting a winger like that. It's a very Celtic-y thing to have a winger like that, and they're not easy to come by. As football becomes more tactical, more controlled, more analytical, more numbers-based and all that, more and more all the time, there's not really an awful lot of room left for that level of expression in the games. Guys who are going to go out there and do tricks, go out there and beat players for the sake of it, go out there and nutmeg a guy just purely for the entertainment value. That doesn't often happen. So again, I mean, all I'm doing is reinforcing the point I've made already, that to get a guy like that for 6 odd million, and I don't regret having made the wild comparisons last season about how he's maybe the first guy we've had like that since Di Canio, a guy who's completely unpredictable, can play anywhere, can score goals, can take people on, can get people, kind of off their seat and all that. An absolute steal. What a find.
It was good to see Johnny Hayes back at Celtic Park, reminding us
For the dads. Yeah, it was good to see him back.
Reminding us with that miss why we got shot. That was a shocker.
It really was. I wasn't aware at the time of how
Nor
bad
was
it was. I was aware from where we sit on the halfway line in the north stand. I was aware that someone was close in and put it past the post. I was convinced they'd scored because of the way the ball kind of went past the post. Right, I was convinced they'd scored. It wasn't until I saw the highlights back I thought, that's a badging. That's a badging, Johnny. Because if he was under pressure. It was one of those ones. Hatate wasn't he? He's quite bad for that. Doesn't he chase his man back into the box? Right, that's something to be worked on. But see if he was under pressure, somebody snapping at his heels, pulling his jersey, and he managed to get a toe on it, and it went wide. You'd be like, fair enough. But he took a touch, steadied himself, and then just bent it in the post. So thanks, Agent Johnny, for keeping us in this title race.
It was a really poor one from Aberdeen. Didn't deserve a goal. I thought Celtic were quite controlled, but that was around that time where Ange was talking about, where we let them into the game ever so slightly. But that chance, but apart from that, Joe Hart had a couple of one save when it hit off Callum McGregor and nailed it in. But apart from that, look, Celtic are controlling these games, and it happened so much in towards the end of last season, from 2022 right up to now. Like, Celtic don't look like conceding goals because they don't concede a lot of chances. And when you're saying about Aberdeen could maybe come out, I wish they would. But at the same time, it's a big ask going up against this Celtic team because we're bloody good at football.
Just speaking about options, Stephen, Aramoy came on to make his competitive debut for Celtic. Looked a bit like he was towing a caravan. He's clearly not still up to fitness. But one thing that intrigued me, and then seeing subsequently the news after, it was no place for James McCarthy in the matchday squad whatsoever. So it looks like any squads that he was involved in, Aramoy's probably going to take his place there. And subsequently it's come out that James McCarthy's probably looking for a move away for Celtic now, so they've probably had a conversation, and it's no surprising, is it? No,
I don't have any particular insight on this. This is purely just a guess, but Mikey Johnston wasn't in the squad either, and the suggestion has been that they're looking for a club. Well, not even a suggestion. The literal statement is that they're trying to find him a club to go and play a bit of football this season. So I would maybe hazard a guess that anyone who has a chance of a move just now isn't involved in the squad, and that includes Julian, that includes McCarthy and Mikey Johnson, none of whom were involved. What
about Ayeti? Come on.
Ayeti.
You must have forgot.
Do you know what? I feel like we need to keep talking about him every couple of podcasts, right? Because you do forget he exists. You forget he's at the club.
Forgetty Ayeti.
Yes, that's it.
James McCarthy, it's clear now that he has no place, has no value to this squad whatsoever, because you look at the squad, very, very strong in midfield, but we've got rid of a few. Sorrow's away, and a number of other players have left, not necessarily in that position. But Ideguchi got a bad injury during the week there at training, so he's not in the squad, and neither is James McCarthy. So he's still not in the squad, despite the fact we've lost Ideguchi, who all the fans, including us, all talk about as being competition for the same position. He's out of the squad, and James McCarthy still isn't there. So it's clear that he doesn't really have any worth to this squad. He is a good player, of course he is, but I can't help but feel that had Celtic not stepped in, and whoever was in charge of the transfer, I don't know, there's been a lot of speculation on that. Had Celtic not stepped in and offered him a wild contract, he'd be at Sunderland or something.
Yeah.
That seems like a sensible career path for a guy like that who's played at a very high level his whole career, but he's clearly not really got whatever it was that kept him at that level. And I think he'd probably belongs in like the Championship or something.
Yeah, I must admit, Melly, I'm quite surprised at his contribution being so low, because he was a good player, and although he came to us with injury problems, he wasn't 37, 38. Do you know what I mean? There seemed to be some more miles on the clock, available.
Yeah, and with the signing of Moy as well. Yeah, McCarthy's looking a very strange deal after coming in, but we need to remember that we didn't have any players at this point, so it might have just been needs must. But with Moy coming in, he can play number 6 or 8, so his role on the bench makes more sense. He is versatile. I think we spoke about that last week, but it's an annoying one with McCarthy, because I really wanted that transfer to work out, because I think I always liked him as a player, always thought it would be good to have him at Celtic, and he's a Celtic fan, he's obviously wants to make it work, and him having this pre-season that he didn't have last season, you thought, right, if he's going to get a chance, this is it this season, and it just doesn't look like it's going to happen for him. And again, no harm to the guy, it's like Celtic talking about bringing in this defensive midfielder, and look, we brought in McCarthy and we brought in Ideguchi, and they haven't played because our captain plays in that position and need enough plays every week. So
I mean, Callum McGregor could be sitting on a deck chair by the side of the pitch in that game. It's such an easy shift for him.
Exactly, just he keeps it ticking over, and if they are going to stick a man on him, brilliant, that leaves somebody else free. But it's just a pity with McCarthy. It's one of those ones you're looking at and he's missed a lot of football over his career. He's probably going to want to play. Signing for Celtic, it's just no worked out, has it? And you no harm to him. You wish him the best of luck if he does go. But I'd be happy to see him stay, because if something were to happen to Callum McGregor, I wouldn't have any qualms about him coming in there. But it never seemed like the right fit at Celtic for him in this system. And I just always come back to it. Look, Callum McGregor's going to play. He's not going to want to take rest or that. He's not that type of player. So having a guy there that's not going to play football at his age isn't ideal.
It's no. This game sort of showed you, Stephen, didn't it, that we don't need that defensive midfielder. We just don't.
No.
He's not, or if we do sign him, when's he going to play?
I, for the most part, I just don't think we need one. Of course, again, I think I made this point last week as well. Yeah, you could say that we need them for the Champions League, but who is that? What's the profile of the guy who comes here just to play in the Champions League, just to shoulder barge Kevin De Bruyne off the ball a couple of times? And all that?
Rangers were going to buy Ronaldo and just play with the Champions League.
That's a deep cut for the teenagers there as well. Was that a Daily Record headline?
That was a Daily Record scoop. First, that was a Daily Record scoop in the 90s when Rangers hit it big, when they first started spending big. There was a famous double splash. If we can find an image of it, we might put it up here on the YouTube. It was a famous double splash about this team Rangers were going to sign, and famously Ronaldo, their Ronaldo, was going to be signed exclusively to play in Champions League games.
A team for Europe and a team for Scotland.
Do you know who would remember that? David Martindale. Probably vividly remembers. He was either in the stand or in the jail during the Rangers 9-0 era.
Aye, David Martindale. What a little toad he's been this week, eh?
Just Tav does what Tav does. No, David, that's not how opposition managers are supposed to speak about the team that just beat them. Do you think we could get any? I know our podcast's a bit more highbrow than the Battle Fever podcast, but any Celtic-minded managers we could think we get in here?
That's a good
Jim
point.
Goodwin.
Look
at that, I got him.
Eddie Howe.
Eddie Howe.
I mean, David Martindale. He's like Chick Young with a clipboard now, or Chick Young with a tactics board. That's what he's basically become.
It's
when
the
it comes
most
to Rangers.
tin pot thing I've ever seen. A Premier League manager going on a Rangers fans podcast, and he was interviewed in his Livy office, and he was just on there to deny about how he's a Rangers fan and blah blah blah. The most tin pot thing ever. And since you mentioned Chick Young, his post-match analysis of the Celtic game was even Ange was like, I don't know so much about that first game of the season. Chick Young's just letting Ange know he's there. They're
He
like,
retired like 5 years ago. What's he still doing?
Look, you can say that about absolutely every guy that's on every boomer on BBC Sports.
Ange felt his presence, didn't he? Even Willie Miller.
Yes.
The absolutely dour Willie Miller was like, Chick Young's managed to make that game sound close somehow there. Weird interview. He kept asking him about how it stopped just short of asking Ange how it went off the rails at the end of this 2-0 cruise to victory.
It didn't go your own way. And just like, I don't know, mate. You know, if every game goes that way, I'd be quite happy about it.
Exactly. Where were we? Oh, yes, defensive midfielders about 5 minutes ago. Yeah, I watched that game and I thought, right, I actually literally heard someone at the game shout, "This is suicidal," right? And it was because Joe Hart came out of his box, but the ball was like 80 yards away or something like that. No, the ball wasn't in the corner flag. This is suicidal. But it got me thinking about how, like, if we have a defensive destroyer in that team, those two things are counterintuitive, aren't they? Like having a guy who breaks up the play miles away back, but also your keeper has pushed out as well. If we were expecting to have to deal with a number of breakaways, you wouldn't have your keeper come out of the box in the first place. So I just don't think that a defensive midfielder is on the cards, or certainly not one of the big the big physical dominant profile that is often spoken of. No.
Well, if McCarthy was to go, do you think we would bring somebody in then? Because get Ideguchi, you've got Moy that can play there. I know you kind of want 2 players for every position, but
I think it'd be on a fair wedge. But I don't know if we'd bring somebody in that position. But I think if McCarthy goes and Mikey Johnson goes, I think we need to bring in a winger anyway. But that frees up a decent amount of cash there to bring in a fairly competent guy, perhaps on loan.
Because if McCarthy left along with Julian and Ayeti, you're looking at that. I know it's not everything, but that is a hefty lot of wages we are paying players that really don't contribute at all. I mean, if we hadn't signed McCarthy last season, would it have made much difference? No. He did all right in the games he came in, I thought, but at the same time, him and Ideguchi, would we be any worse off if we hadn't signed one of them? Probably not.
Nah, not at this point. New strip launched. New strip dropped today. The third kit looks very much like a third kit, doesn't it? Yeah. The third kits are always a bit easily identifiable as the third kit. Training top vibes again kind of happens from the third kit as well. Mind that New Balance one that was like, I think you might have it was like a luminous green. I can't remember what year it came out.
I do have that. Yeah,
we were like convinced it was supposed to be a training top. It's got that look about it.
Only the bold was the. The luminous green one. The luminous green one. That was
Dembele. I remember.
Yeah, that's different to the kind of black and yellowy, greeny kind of neon thing. Yeah, I've got that as well. I can remember Lustig scoring a brace in was it a semi-final or something like that? I remember him scoring a couple in that. But this new one, I like it.
I think it's a sleeper.
It was pretty instant with me. Actually, the home one that came out this season, the first couple of pictures I saw of it, the leaked pictures, comes out, it looks like if somebody's left it in the floor somewhere, and you're like, I don't know about that. But this one I think looks really good, to be honest. As soon as I saw it, I was like, that's a beezer.
Definitely going to be one of those strips, a bit like a few of the away New Balance ones that weren't so popular at the time, and then you look back and you go, I wish I got that.
Yeah, growers, I think it's fine. The 2 strips we've already had out are crackers for me, so to get another one like that would be very difficult, but decent enough. It obviously looks better when you see the proper photos when it's been dropped rather than the just leaked photos, but decent strips this season, can't I grumble at that? I like the wee pattern on the
I like
the
it.
sleeve.
Again, it doesn't really reference anything, I don't think, or maybe it'll come out that it's actually...
Apparently it's like a geometric representation of Celtic Park, like the kind of
is it?
Pillars
right, I see.
Apparently.
Very clever. They probably they made it and then came up with that after the fact. They came up with that. Melly, when's the Champions League draw? I'm getting impatient.
The 25th of August, I think it is. It's a Thursday at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Not that I'm counting down.
No, not long now. And that's probably a good place to bring this podcast to an end. Thank you so much to everyone who watches and listens. If you want to support this podcast, if you want extra content, patreon.com/20minutetims is where you can find that. We do podcasts and writing and videos and all that great stuff. Patreon.com/20minutetims. Thanks for listening.